All right, and everybody can see my screen? At least one person can. All right, so welcome to today's meeting, the March 2nd meeting of the Manufacturing Technology Working Group. As I mentioned, Ron and Jackie have another commitment and may be joining us late. The main agenda item today is to review the interim draft report. I sent that over earlier in the morning. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it, and we can go through and do some comments. The provider spotlight today will be Chris talking about the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative, and then I will talk about the in-person meeting, which we have scheduled for March 30th. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or comments people have right now, other than on the interim report. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, then we'll move on to Chris talking about the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative. I will stop sharing my screen and we'll see if Chris can share his.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Let's see. How's that? You see that, Jeff?
We are not in presentation mode. There you go.
Let me switch the screens.
Oh,
how's that?
Yes, that looks good.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. So I'll just give everyone a quick overview of the Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative, a fairly young organization compared to many of the other folks who have presented at this meeting, and just kind of talk at the end about where the CMC sees their role with the Industry 4.0 working group. So the Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative, you can see on this slide the mission at the top, but I've got a bullet here that just really breaks it down for everyone who's not aware of the CMC. And we're an association or a getting together of Connecticut's manufacturing associations, an association of the associations, if you will. And the main purpose that we do at our now monthly meetings is sharing best practices among the associations. What best practices are the associations having around different activities? What are their members talking about? So these are the manufacturing associations throughout Connecticut that represent your customers, Connecticut's manufacturers, if you will. We also started back in 2018 to better understand the ecosystem, who are the players in the manufacturing ecosystem, and of course to develop manufacturing priorities, which I'll spend some time talking about. It's not atypical for the group of associations to come together in an association, as kind of funny as that sounds. CBIA convenes other groups around the state. I know Cindy Bombard's on this call, and we bring together the Connecticut Chamber executives in case on a regular basis. So the Chamber executives could cross amongst each other with best practices and policy priorities and grassroots. The bioscience group, tax professionals, there's other groups that we bring together as a convener so they could talk amongst themselves. Even though we're a very small state, we have a tendency to be a little bit fragmented. And so it's an opportunity for folks to understand what's happening around our state. As I said, CMC is fairly young, formed in 2018. Believe it or not, it was 10 years in the making. This was something a few of us had talked about back in 2008 before the recession hit. And back then, it just was not the right time. Joe Brennan, Bonnie Del Conte, former presidents of CBIA and CONSTEP, respectively, myself and a gentleman named Jerry Klepper, who at that time was running the New Haven Manufacturers Association, got together in 2008 talking about this concept of an association hub for the associations. And really the coming together of CBI and CONSTEP is what kind of was the hurdle to get us over this discussion after a long period of time, as well as some leadership changes at various associations. So I want to just kind of take this slide to bring you back in time a little bit, and what did the manufacturing community look like pre-2018? And I think this is something for us all to think about relative to what the technology ecosystem for manufacturing looked like maybe in 2022. Manufacturing, very fragmented. We were fighting for common resources. I think Senator Hartley will tell you we were a very noisy group at the Capitol with many, many priorities. I know I would go in and testify on a bill, and then another association would come in behind me and testify on something different, and then another association would come in behind them. And policymakers were scratching their head going, well, what's the real priorities of the manufacturing community? And we weren't capitalizing on synergies that we had as we maybe came together speaking as one voice. So hence the Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative was created in an attempt to take these many puzzle pieces and bring them together in a better looking picture. And some of the names have changed since then. And the member organization has grown a little bit since 2018. But here's a picture of what the group looks like in 2022. ACM, SMA, CTMA, NESMA, NHMA, which is now known as Manufacturing CT, Concept, EMA, Metal, CBIA. And we just had a new member join this month, the Naval Maritime Consortium, which is kind of the ACM of the naval industry, if you will. They're multi-state, but they're focused down the southeast corner of Connecticut, and they just joined the CMC this month because they want to understand more about the ecosystem and how we could all leverage each other. And then on the outside of the membership organizations, you kind of see all and many other partners, if you will, the CMC partners that join many of our calls to talk about their services in a variety of areas: workforce, education, economic growth, and of course, technology, which this group is focused on. When you pull out the CMC organizations, they represent about 2,000 manufacturing members, a little bit more than that, which is 50% of the manufacturing community in Connecticut, and approximately 100,000 of the 155,000 people working in manufacturing, so 75% of the employment base. So as we think about a communication plan relative to the i4.0 working group, clearly the CMC can play a significant role in deploying that communication to a mass group of people in a relatively quick and easy and organized fashion. We are also a resource for, Paul Lavoie, who's on the call, Chief Manufacturing Officer, Kelly Marie Valeris, going the other way. If folks are struggling to understand what manufacturing needs are, sometimes we'll drop a survey out across the entire CMC community, so all 10 associations, and they'll poll their members and bring that information back. So it's a two-way kind of communication, if you will. And so just some things we've accomplished. I won't go through the whole list, but obviously our first priority, I think many of you know, which kind of puts CMC on the map, was our first priority coming out of the 2018 formation and going into the 2019 session, was the creation of what we called back then the manufacturing czar, or the secretary of manufacturing, which is now known as the chief manufacturing officer position, which took a bit of effort, and thanks obviously to Senator Hartley and others who were big supporters of it. But not only did we advocate for the creation of the position, we also advocated for Colin Cooper, endorsed Colin Cooper unanimously across CMC as the first person to fill that position. Several other areas where we played and been involved in heavily: Transfer Act, a lot of stuff around education, and of course funding the MIF and funding certain programs in the MIF. We've also done some best practice sharing around things like multi-employer training. A few years ago, incumbent worker training was just a company-specific tool. You couldn't pull a group of employers together necessarily and use incumbent worker training. But it was tough for some of our smaller manufacturers to send 5, 6, 8 people to incumbent worker training. So we advocated for and got the MIF rules changed so that incumbent worker training can now be more of a multi-employer thing. And so 10 employers could get together, send 1 employee each to incumbent worker training, and leverage that, which ACM and some of the other associations do really well. And fortunately or unfortunately for you all on this call, one of our last pieces of legislation last year, which passed very late in the session, was the Industry 4.0 working group. The reason being, I'll share with you all, is that, as I mentioned at the opening, we felt the manufacturing groups were finally coming together, but the technology ecosystem was still unknown or maybe fragmented relative to our manufacturers. And so we thought it was important to bring all the players in the ecosystem together to understand, what services are out there, what's the swim lane for everyone relative to those services, and how can we best communicate that to our manufacturers so that they more clearly understand what's out there. And I know, Jeff, that's a lot of the work that this group has been doing, and we're looking forward to eventually being able to kind of communicate that to the manufacturers. We've been doing it all along. Jeff and several others and Jackie were on a CMC call a few months ago and kind of gave an update as to what this group's been doing to the CMC, which then allows the association to distribute that to their membership. And so that's why I kind of checked off the boxes relative to marketing and deployment of the activities that are being done at this group. There's still some activities that we haven't gotten through on the policy side that we'll continue to work on this year and moving forward. And we've talked, Paul, just recently yesterday about taking an opportunity at some point in time to step back and now hopefully as we get out of COVID in a reactive mode, what's the overall strategy for manufacturing Connecticut for the next 5 or 10 years? And what are the specific things we need to do to make that strategy happen? So we're hoping CMC will work closely with Paul and many others in kind of formulating that strategy and then making sure our policies are aligned to implementing that strategy over the next several years. So a lot there. We're certainly here to help you all get in touch with manufacturers. And of course, Jeff, we're here to help you communicate all the efforts that's being done at this level of the working group and the eventual outcomes of the Industry 4.0 group. I'm happy to take any questions, Jeff, if there are any, and that's all I had.
Yep, thank you, Chris. So if anybody has questions for Chris, please either jump in or raise your hand. All right. And I will move on to
Recording in progress.
Jessica, did you have a question? Your hand was up, then down.
did I miss somebody?
Thought I saw Jessica have her hand up.
Oh, okay. All right. So now I'll walk through the interim report. Please feel free to comment on it as we go through. We will add an executive summary to kind of set context. I've received a few other comments. I will try to incorporate those as I talk. I didn't update all the slides, but I'll incorporate the feedback we got as we go along. All right. So just starting off, and again, this part of the report is just trying to walk through where the committee's been, the working group's been for the last 5 months. And so just updating the legislation on who we are, the providers and the manufacturers. The roadmap of the working group that we followed so far. So we launched in August 2021, broke into our 4 work streams in the fall, did a progress report in Q1, have begun updating on the ecosystem cataloging, and are moving towards our strategic plan, which is due in Q3. Just highlighting the deliverables of the work group. This is the deliverable on the comprehensive profiles. And next is the deliverable on the value stream map and understanding how the ecosystem works together and the gaps in it. These are directly out of the legislation. Just highlighting that we kicked off with an introduction by doing a survey of the group, and I just highlighted one of the points of the survey, which is the utilization of some of the service providers. Didn't want to go into details of all the data we collected. And then highlighting the 4 parallel work streams we broke into: the value stream mapping, the resources, the outreach, and the ecosystem mapping. And then we'll go through each of those 4 work streams. So outreach was targeted at finding an awareness of manufacturers to provide, was targeted at creating awareness of the manufacturers to provide awareness to the provider network. Thank you. And so they're looking at an engage, educate, enable model. And you know, some of the details that that team came up with. And then the resources work stream was focused on SBIR, STTR, and it was suggested that we provide definitions here, so I'll do that, and including other grant opportunities and resources. And so the SBIR resources are generating awareness and combating a lack of awareness in those resources for Connecticut, humanizing the process pre and post award services and success stories, and then looking at access to talent, university partnerships, and alternate sources of funding. And then the value stream mapping group, this is similar to the report out that we did to the team, where we were looking at the value stream. We used the SIPOC model to visualize the business process from beginning to end, and looking at the current state of how SMM would integrate i4.0 technologies. And so I highlighted that work with a process map outcome. I didn't want to include the full SIPOC. There was some comments that we should talk a little bit about some of the inputs and outputs. So maybe I will graphically represent those from the SIPOC on this to show some of the touch points on this model. And then the ecosystem cataloging, Constep is doing that with support from DECD or from the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. And we've hired an intern to do that, as we mentioned last week, and that is now in process. And I do thank all the service providers on our team who have helped her get started with those profiles. So that is the draft interim report, and welcome to hear any comments or feedback you guys have on it.
Hey, Jeff, this is Mike Rocheleau.
Yep.
I think you started touching on it, but when I went through it, the process map has really, in my mind, it needs context to it. That one doesn't seem to, of everything that you presented, that one doesn't seem to stand on its own and deliver, you know, the so what, who cares answers to the to the question as I look at it. So I don't, and I was part of it. I'm not sure that I understand what the value is in the process map.
Okay, I actually find a lot of value, Mike, so I'll try to, maybe it's too much just in my head, so we'll try to give that some context and share that a little better.
Thank you. That's my 2 cents, and you know what it's worth, 2 cents, maybe less.
So the Nicole Russo here as well. So thank you, Chris and Jeff, for the presentations. I just want to add on the process map, there's a question mark there on the proceed, you know, and I think that is leaving me ambiguous on, you know, who's going to make that decision on what the next step is and how we're proceeding. So can you add some color to that? And maybe as you build the process map out more, Jeff, that may be answered.
Yeah, and I guess this is the process map a manufacturer would follow, right? That's what this is intended. So this would be the executive team at the manufacturer. So clearly this needs more context to make that clear. So I will fix that.
Okay, understood. Okay, thank you. Because
Yep, thank you.
For me, back to Mike's point, then, you know, the solutions, maybe we could list 3 to 5 solution opportunities and then 3 to 5 providers underneath each that would give, you know, some context. So thank you.
Okay.
Hey, Jeff, it's Eric.
Yeah, hi,
Um,
Eric.
Hi. So I just, and this is great and all the work you guys are doing, terrific. I just wanted to flag in case there was anything we needed to mention. Part of the timing for making the report due when it was that the legislative session would be going on. And so, if we needed any help, and not even necessarily in the formal legislation, but any assistance in any way. I think we have access to that anyways, but, to the extent anything's been flagged that, we'd like to do this or we'd like to have access to that, but, or the legislation from last year is not clear in this aspect or that aspect. And, we need some clarity. I haven't thought of anything in those categories, but I just want to make sure, people thought about it in part in that context too. Because again, that's kind of why the deadline was put sort of in the middle of the legislative session.
No, thank you, Eric. And, just to highlight that what our interim report was really supposed to get at is any barriers we were facing as a working group. And at this point, I think, as Eric suggested, none have really risen to the surface. I think we're moving well, moving forward in a good pace. But that was what the main objective of the March 15th interim report was. So certainly if people feel there are barriers, we should be highlighting those. Just to point out that Ron, Beatrice, Jackie, and I have made ourselves totally open to both the Commerce Committee and the Manufacturing Caucus if they want to present, right? So at a moment's notice, we would provide this in a live format to them if that can work into the session details.
Hey, Jeff, this is Mike again.
Yep.
We have a constituency, a customer that this is deliverable to. Have you, or do you intend to take one or two key people in that constituency and sort of pre-review, make sure they believe it's meeting the objective that when it goes and is delivered to a greater audience besides us?
I'm certain that we'll get the input from Senator Hartley and Senator Curry and the rest of the Commerce Committee if that they have any. So, and the basic format was discussed with them. So this was what they were looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Jeff, just a quick question. One of the objectives in the deliverables are recommendations for implementation, I believe. Am I missing that or?
Yeah, and so that's in the final report for October and was not called out in the interim report for March.
Okay.
So we're still marching towards that outcome.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now let's see, I'm in multiple applications here, so I think I need to stop sharing. Back to this and then reshare. All right, everybody seeing the agenda again? Yep, okay, good. So thank you, Chris. And so the final item for today is just discussion of the in-person meeting. I will send an invitation out shortly after this. I just wanted to have the leadership team that meets after this meeting discuss it in case there's anything else we need to tweak. We're going to meet on the morning of Wednesday, March 30th. We will hold the meeting at the first floor training room of Constep in Hartford. We anticipate beginning kind of networking at 8:30 with having the meeting go from 9 to 11:30. And then CCAT will host a tour of the ATC in East Hartford for those who haven't seen it recently. And that tour will go from about noon to 1. So that will give you all an opportunity to see the new equipment and services and support that CCAT offers over in East Hartford. Any questions on that? And again, I'll put a calendar hold out later today.
Hey, Jeff, will that
Yep.
calendar hold also include an agenda so we can prepare?
We'll work on that as the next step. So I want to get this on your calendar, but we will work on the agenda as we move towards March 30th. So,
Great.
you know, the basic idea is to move towards the swim lanes and the gap analysis, but we'll formalize that better as we move closer to the date.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
So this is Beatriz, just to summarize what I heard and just make sure that we got it correctly. I think one thing that was identified during this meeting is the need for context on the descriptions to give some sense of who, what are they reviewing, particularly in the map. And then I think Eric did make a really great comment on, and this is for the whole working group, is there anything that we should ask about? And that's something for the group to think about on the legislation. So it's, you know, right now the legislation is first silent on resources and it's more about measuring the ecosystem. Is there a particular resource or a clarification that is required during this session? And I just want to make sure that we bring this up to everyone, because I know we have had conversations internally about, for example, how is BRI, you know, how the city next piece walks into the rest in there. So we need to, you know, if there's an opportunity to clarify that on scope during this legislative session, it may be a good way to do it. And then the last part, I think also was very important is the audience. So I will say, let's try to get this done together. And then as always, Senator Harley and other members of Commerce are part of the team, the leadership steering team, the same with the chief manufacturing officer. So Paul, I want to make sure you're included in the meeting, because we always had the benefit of Colin's insight. So let's make sure we kind of wrap that and add to it now, and you know, then we'll move to the next parts. I just wanted to make sure that's what if I missed something, please bring it up, because that's how we're gonna start working together with Jeff and Jess and Jackie.
Yeah, I was going to remind Paul that he should stick around when the meeting ends for the leadership gathering. I'm not sure he was aware. All right, anything else? All right, then next meeting is in 2 weeks, Wednesday, March 16th, 11 a.m. online. And then we'll see you in person on Wednesday, March 30th. All right, thank you, everyone, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Jeff.
So